Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jay Cowart. I am an immigration administrator here at Insight Global. It's my great privilege to work on our Insight Global Health's International Nursing Program. Welcome to the second panel of a series of panels where we get to talk to you about what we do, how we do it, why we're so proud that we do it. And today we're joined by our amazing legal partner, Chris Musillo. He helps us get international nurses here in jobs in the United States. Chris, do you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
No, Jay, thanks so much for having me on this panel. I'm very pleased to work with Insight Global. And my name is Chris Musillo, and I'm an immigration attorney here in Cincinnati, Ohio. I work for Musillo Unkenholt, which is a law firm here in Cincinnati, and we have about 15 or 20 U.S. immigration attorneys and about 50 immigration paralegals. And everybody here, some component of their job works on healthcare-based immigration, and so we're so pleased to be partnering with Insight Global, helping a bunch of really qualified nurses come to the United States and work at some really great work sites.
Thanks, Chris. All right, so I'd love to jump into what we're discussing today. So, Chris, from your perspective, what sets Insight Global apart from other US-based nursing, staffing, and education companies in terms of immigration processes and experiences?
Yeah, so what Insight Global does is what the best U.S. Recruiting and staffing companies do in the United States, which is they focus on the aspects of immigration processing that they can control. They dedicate an enormous amount of resources to making sure that each nurse is qualified for the position, that each nurse has a good experience as she's working her way through the immigration pipeline. You know, Jay, one of the concerns that I often get from nurses throughout the U.S. immigration process is that the process takes a long time, and it unquestionably does. And maybe even more concerning is that the variance on that time can differ. We'll see one nurse whose green card only takes maybe 9 months, and then another green card takes 19 months. And the reality is that's not something that Musillo Unkenholt is doing better or worse for any clients, and it's not something IGH is doing better or worse for any clients. It's really the government that has that kind of variance. And we can't control that variance. And sometimes worrying and trying about that can be a problem. But there are a part that we can control. And Insight does such an excellent job of managing the part that we can control. And so I think that aspect of IGH, like I mentioned earlier, that's what the very best in this field do, and IGH does it as well.
Thank you for that. So, Chris, what do you see Insight Global Health doing to leave their mark on the healthcare staffing industry in the United States?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few things that Insight does, but I think the number one thing you guys do is you dedicate an enormous amount of resources, both time, employee base, recruiters, just raw dollars, just money and effort to this process. And what that does is it allows us to be as creative as possible with immigration options for folks to come to the United States. And so it's that mix of resources and creativity that I think is really a feather for Insight Global. I think you guys do that exceptionally well.
Thanks. I think so too. So, we're here today in large part because the October visa bulletin just came out very recently. Can you explain to us a little bit about what this visa bulletin means in plain English?
Yeah, no, it is a very confusing topic, and it's certainly something that we've seen a lot of questions about in the recent past. So the most recent visa bulletin that came out the third week of September here in 2023 shows that the EB3 category is retrogressed, backlogged until December of 2021. And here we are at the recording of this, and it's September of 2023. And so that's about a 20-month gap between those two dates. And so in this most simple terms, it means that there's a 20-month delay from the time one's I-140 is filed until the time they have their visa appointment in Manila or London or Jamaica or wherever around the world the nurse is being recruited from. And so that 20 months is the current processing time for the EB3. But one thing I think that's important for everybody to know is that 20 months is an average, and there's a lot of variance around there. My guess is that for nurses whose EB3s are filed now, Some of them may get their green cards in as quick as 12 to 15 months, perhaps, and they may wait as long as 20 or 24 months. It will really depend on how that visa bulletin moves over the next year and a half or so. But again, in the simplest terms, it means that the US government is taking about 20 months to process these EB3 visas.
Okay. So for nurses or for EB3 petitioners out there who maybe have worked super hard to take this big risk and are ready to start their life in the United States, it's quite a wait, right?
Yeah, so that's really what's frustrating about this is because the nurses, many of whom I'm sure are watching this, you've done your part. You've gotten your education. You've passed your licensing exams. You've passed English fluency exams. You've had background checks, perhaps. You've taken jobs, perhaps even to gain some experience, and so you're doing everything that you should be doing. And so that must be terribly frustrating for for the nurses to have to put up with. But I can tell you this: the U.S. nursing shortage is dire. U.S. patients really need more nurses here in the United States, and so the nurses are still wanted. I'm sure that 20 months is frustrating as an average EB3 processing time, but don't think that means that the U.S. doesn't need your talents and want your talents. We still do. It's just taking longer than we'd hoped.
Yeah. Do you know, are there other options to get into the United States sooner than 20 months?
Yes. So the big one here is the H-1B visa, which is an option for certain nurses, and it's not necessarily for every nurse. But the H-1B visa is a non-immigrant or temporary visa that can allow nurses to come to the United States much quicker than that 20-month processing time.
Okay. So, Chris, when I think of the H-1B visa, I think of the H-1B lottery, the lottery that we draw from in the United States to even give someone a chance to apply. I also understand that Insight Global Health and systems like Multicare are exempt from this lottery and can just apply outright. Can you explain to me why that is and why the chance to apply for an H-1B for a nurse working with Insight Global and Multicare is just guaranteed and they can just go for it?
Yeah, no. So this is the real appeal, Jay, of the H-1B visa, which is we're talking about a 20-month processing time on average for EB3 if that case were to be filed today. For the H-1B visas that we were filed, as opposed to the EB3s, the H-1B visas, we are seeing nurses landing in the United States here in late September 2023. And those H-1Bs were filed in June and July. And so you can see that that's just a brief 3-month or so time from the filing of the H-1B until landing into the United States. And so there's a lot of appeal for that. Now, one thing you hit on that I think is a good place for us to just spend a minute, which is the H-1B lottery.
Mm-hmm.
Most H-1B cases are subject to what's called the H-1B lottery, which means we are only allowed to prepare your case in March, and then it goes through a lottery, and something like 2/3 of the lottery applicants are unfortunately rejected, not because they're not qualified, not because they've done something wrong, not because the law firm's done anything wrong, or IGH, or for that matter, the employer like Multicare has done anything wrong. The lottery is just simply a function of a quota of 85,000 H-1B visas in any U.S. fiscal year. However, there's a small segment of U.S. employers who are what are called lottery exempt, or more commonly called H-1B cap exempt. And in this instance, we are allowed to take advantage of the H-1B cap exempt rules. Why is that? Because the end client, Multicare, has a relationship. They are affiliated with a local university teaching hospital there in their community, such that the university sends nurses into the hospital so that young nursing students can be educated and can shadow more experienced nurses. Because of that affiliation relationship, Multicare is H-1B cap exempt. What does that mean? That means that we can file the H-1B 12 months a year. We're not just limited to those March filing times. Likewise, because Insight is placing that nurse at Multicare, which is cap exempt, therefore the Multicare facility becomes cap exempt, and then therefore IGH's placement at Multicare becomes cap exempt. And so also likewise, IGH nurses who are going to a cap exempt facility do not have to wait until March.
So what I think I'm hearing, Chris, is there is a much easier way for nurses to be able to start the next chapter of their life after deciding to transition to working in the United States, and the H-1B could be a great pathway for that. But if the end goal is still an EB-3 green card, can you tell me what the chances are from going from H-1B to EB-3? What are the chances that somebody might get rejected from their green card if they're in the United States working on an H-1B?
Yeah, so the H-1B workers who come in, whether they're working in multi-care, whether they're working in IGH, IGH and multi-care are committed that that nurse is going to be working indefinitely and for the long term. Neither IGH nor multi-care, and Frank, this is true for a lot of our clients, they're not interested in just hiring the nurse for a short period of time. They want these nurses to come here, become embedded in the community, find schools for their children, places to work for their spouses, churches, houses of worship, be full members of the community. And so as a result of that, IGH and multi-care, if that nurse comes in on her H-1B, they are going to also file for the EB-3 visa shortly after arriving in the United States. In terms of the likelihood of that EB-3 being denied for an H-1B worker, we never want to say there's no chance because there's always outliers. But for the vast, vast, vast majority of people who file H-1Bs and enter the United States on H-1Bs, their EB-3s will be processed and approved at exactly the same rate as the overseas cases.
Amazing. Thank you. So, Chris, to round out the end of our panel here, from your perspective, why should nurses out there in the world trust Insight Global Health with their journey to the United States?
Yeah, so I think the resource commitment that IGH has put towards this program means that at every step during the process, that nurse is going to be able to get her questions answered quickly, timely. IGH is going to really control. They're going to lean on the law firm as well. We're going to lean back on IGH. And so the partnership is very strong, and we're going to rely on each other to move the case competently and quickly throughout the process. And we're already starting to see the results. So to some degree, whatever I say is sort of immaterial. The reality is nurses are landing in the United States as we're recording this.
Thank you so much, Chris. This has been super enlightening and very, very helpful. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Thank you to everybody who joined us and is watching this. Be sure to tune in later for future panels as we discuss all sorts of topics and give you guys some insight onto some of the amazing work that we're doing here.